Hi, thanks for tuning in to Noir Histoire. I'm Natasha, and in this episode of the Career Interview Series, we'll be hearing from Joy Williams, a media entrepreneur who was born in Washington, D.C. and raised in Long Island, New York. Joy is a lifelong student whose love of learning new things began in childhood, with her parents encouraging her and her siblings to try different activities. Her career in media began with a role as the stage manager of a play and chorus and wearing multiple hats at a high school radio station. Since then, her career has included positions at MTV, HBO, ESPN, and most recently, two of her own companies. We'll get into the interview, but stick around for the key takeaways. Today we have with us Joy Williams, the founder of Gospel Fit and also the managing director of RBN Media. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. So to get things started, we'll jump right into the interview. If you could give me a little bit of a brief intro to your background, where are you from and your family as well?
Sure. I grew up on Long Island. I was really born in DC, but I started in the first grade in Long Island. So pretty much I'm a Long Islander. Um, so I grew up in the suburbs and I moved into the city. So I live in Harlem now. I moved into the city before going to business school. So I've been here since then. So it's been a while.
Okay. And where's your family from?
My,
Your mom and
my
dad.
my father is from DC, which is where I was born, and my mother's from Greenville, South Carolina.
And what were you like as a kid?
So I was the kind of kid who liked to do everything, which was great because my parents had us involved in a lot of things. So I was pretty active in athletics and dance and drama. So whatever there was to do, I would do it. I fenced, fenced with someone who eventually went to the Olympics. I took tennis lessons. I did everything. So in high school, I was on the track team, a cross country team, and the stage manager of the play and chorus. So I was really active in a number of things. So I've never had a loss for trying something new.
While you were in school, what were like your favorite subjects? And what kind of a student were you?
Um, I was a pretty good student. I was in the honors program, so you had to maintain a minimum of like 85 average to stay in that. So I did the work that I needed to do to make sure I did that. I think some of my favorite classes were math and some of them were science, but I liked most things. I was an athletic person, but I probably disliked going to gym. And maybe that was because you had to change your clothes in the middle of the day and change back. But so when I was on the track team, I didn't have to go to gym, so that was another exciting reason to go to gym. And I was in the choir. I was president of the select chorale. I was on the high school radio station, so I was the only woman and might be the only person who did all three roles, which were DJ, newsreader, and engineer. So you name it,
And
I probably tried it.
when you worked at the radio station, was that in high school or prior to high school?
No, that was in high school. So it was the radio station was the radio station that was piped in to the school. So
Okay.
before the first period started, and then the morning announcements came from there too. So yeah, I would get to school early, and if depending on the role I was doing, like if I was doing the news, we take the New York Times and take the summaries. I don't even think the New York Times is organized the same way, and take the summaries from the New York Times from the physical paper, and then change the intro and read those. If I was the DJ, I selected the music that we played, and if I was an engineer, I played the music for the DJ.
While you were in high school, did you have like your first part-time job during that time, or did you mostly focus just like on your academics and extracurricular activities?
Mostly the extracurricular activities. I did have a babysitting job, but it wasn't for lack of me trying. So I remember when the McDonald's first opened in Freeport, I went and tried to get a job there. They didn't hire me. So a lot of places didn't hire me. So um, so I didn't have a serious job except for babysitting, which is my mother deciding that I needed to do that. I didn't particularly care for babysitting, but I did it anyway. And then other than that, like my first job after that was in college. I had the student job, and then over the summers I worked at a park for several years.
Following high school, what was the decision process, or what ultimately led to you choosing the college that you attended?
So one of my social studies teacher was saying that I should apply to all seven of the Seven Sister schools. I didn't. I applied to some of them, but then I stopped. I was tired of applications. And I also applied to Howard. So my father went to Howard. And when I was young, my grandmother was still living in DC. And I said I was going to go to Howard and live with her. But she passed when I was 13. And I decided that I wanted a different plan. So at the end of the day, I got accepted to Vassar and to Howard. And I decided I did have other family at Howard that I didn't want to go there. So I went to Vassar instead. And while I was going to Vassar, I decided I would go on exchange to Spelman. So I would have the Seven Sisters School experience, which is a white institution, and some time at Spelman, a historically black college. And interestingly enough, so both Vassar and Spelman are historically women's colleges. Vassar is now co-ed, and Spelman is still all women. And the Morehouse and Clark Atlanta are right across the street. So it's in a different environment, but sort of, built on the same kind of ideals. Definitely a different experience. I'm glad that I did it. I probably would have gone on exchange for a semester after spending time at Spelman if I were doing it over now, but I think I had a good experience.
Were you at Spelman for a semester or was it for like a full year?
No, just a semester, just one semester. A spring semester, which was interesting because I remember it snowed and it was so little snow,
In
but
Atlanta?
classes were canceled and everything. So it was a different experience because in Poughkeepsie, where Vassar is, it's north of Long Island and upstate New York, and there's more snow, and we really rarely ever close school. So the fact that there was snow and that there were so many accidents before 10 o'clock in the morning, and the cafeteria was open, but there were no classes, so it was different, definitely different experience.
Making the transition from high school to college, well, I guess was there a noticeable transition going from high school to college as far as the social environment or just being on campus at school and away from home?
Yeah, so the one of the things I think Vassar and my high school had about the same number of people, but Vassar's a really large campus and really spread out, and my high school is really very diverse, and Vassar wasn't. There were about 500 people in my class at Vassar, and 24 of us were black. So there were 22 black women and two black men. So it was probably um, maybe 30% Black and 20% Asian or Latino, but there was a good mixture at in high school, and there's Latino, Asian, everything mixed more equally than there was in high school. I mean, the in high school was very mixed, and college wasn't. So you could really see the difference. Trying to think of, it was a different community involvement. I had a mixture of friends. I had a mixture of friends, a diverse group of friends in high school. Um, but this was even more so and less diverse, but I had more white friends that I spent more time with. Because also in Freeport, when I lived on Long Island, I went to church. I went to a black church, so I had more experiences with just black people in a diverse environment as well. So I had, friends of every ethnicity, but there was more time that I spent in the black community, which was very different.
Once you went off to Vassar, what was your major there and how'd you go about choosing your major?
So oftentimes I'm very practical. So I was an econ major. I was an econ and math major for a while. And then my junior year, before I went to Spelman, I was sick with mono. So when I got sick, I was basically missed most of the semester. So in order for me to go on exchange and to graduate in a timely fashion, I dropped the math major. So economics, Vassar's a liberal arts institution, so there's no business per se. So the economics was the study that I decided I wanted to do. I had a vision of doing something in business and maybe business and law. Um, I've had experience in media and all of those other things, but I figured that was really practical. Um, so that's pretty much why I chose it. And I liked math, so I did pretty well in math. Higher level math is a little bit different, a little bit more abstract. So I felt like the easiest thing for me to do was to drop the math part when I got sick. So, and just focus on the econ.
It sounds like your exchange, like when you were at Spelman, that was like later on in your college experience. Was it after
Mhm.
your junior year, correct?
It was the second semester junior year.
Okay. And so when you went to Spelman, you were able to keep like pretty much the same major, right? Like you just took courses at the
Yeah,
with the
so
school?
I took more classes there because one of the things about going away, they didn't count the grades, they just counted the credits. Now you had to get a minimum grade of probably a B, I think, but they just counted the credits. So because I was trying to make up for that, I took six classes and a couple of econ classes. So it wasn't really changing my major, it was just or not changing my major. I just took the classes I wanted to take. So I took some more econ classes. I took an English class, which I took every semester that I was in school. Um, uh, and there were different things like the economy of economic thought in Africa, different things. So it was definitely a different experience because there were a couple of white people in classes around campus. There was someone I knew because she was on exchange that I had met, but I wasn't really in class with her who was white. So really, this was an opportunity for me to be in classes with everyone was Black, African American, and there were a few people who weren't, and then the majority of the professors that I had were Black as well. So it was definitely a different experience. Like the dynamics of class were different. So at Vassar, if you didn't participate, no one really said anything. So at Spelman, pretty much they were calling you. If you weren't there, if you were there, they were calling you. They would take attendance. At Vassar, I guess sometimes people took attendance, but if you didn't speak, that was on you. So it's a different perspective in the classes. And it was Spelman, I think, is more nurturing in a different kind of way. Vassar had more resources. Spelman has more than they used to. I felt like it was definitely a different experience. I definitely felt that was more nurturing in some ways and more challenging in others. There was a class we took at Morehouse, and I say we because there were three of us from Vassar that went, and one of my friends was on the same hallway with me, and we were in a class together. Um, and the professor was African, and the majority of the class was men, which would that probably never happened at Vassar. And then there were three of us. It was my friend from Vassar and another woman who was Jamaican, I think. So it was interesting because we felt at times that the class was relatively sexist. People had their old-fashioned views, but it was interesting to be in that environment. So at the same time, we felt fine saying whatever we wanted to say. So it was a good experience.
Aside from babysitting, you didn't really have a chance to have like a part-time job while you were in high school, but that you did have like your, like I guess, like real first part-time job or something like that in college.
hmm
Can you speak a little bit more about that? What exactly were you doing?
So the first job that I got, the student job I got was way back, and working in the library. So on microfiche and microform, which was not exciting at all. And probably, I don't know, 8 to 10 hours a week. That was my freshman year. And then I interviewed to work in the mug. So Matthew Vassar was a brewer and we had a bar, and I interviewed to work in the mug to be a bartender, which my mother was like, no good Christian girl should be doing that. I was like, whatever. So I did it anyway. Um, and overnight, that changes your social status because people will come up to me and know my name, and I'm like, "How do you know me?" Because I worked at the Mug, and then I worked at the Mug my sophomore year, and then junior and senior year, I was a Mug manager, so which also elevated, you know, you're a Mug manager, one of those rare people. So the Mug was open. It depended. I can't remember what year, but there was a different manager for every night of the week. So we had our crew. So I worked on Thursday one year, and one year I switched with someone who wanted Thursday, and we alternated Thursday and Friday. So that was a really great experience. And then the other things I did during the summer, I worked at a park for the first 2 years, and my the summer of my junior year after working at Spelman, while I was at Spelman, I worked in the career services office, and then I helped myself to get a job, and I worked for Bell Atlantic, which is now Verizon in Fairfax, Virginia. So I had family down there, and I stayed with my aunt. I stayed with one of my aunts in DC, and then I had someone who drove me to work every day. So that's the breadth of all that pre-graduation experience.
Once you and graduated, what was your first job out of college? And did those like previous work experiences play a role in it?
So I looked for a job for a while, and I got a job through an agency working at a magazine, Times Mirror magazine. So I actually was in the circulation department, um, and I probably had the title of assistant or something like that. But it was like we were in a team of 4 people working on a title like Ski and Skiing. So it was interesting in the sense of working for a magazine, but I wasn't connected to editorial or anything. It wasn't um, it wasn't particularly glamorous. We did have a fun offsite, and then I got an offer from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York to work in public information. So I decided to take that offer. So I'd been at Times Mirror magazine for probably 2 or 3 months, or maybe a little bit less. And I remember the person from the agency called me up and said, "Why didn't I call her when I got this other offer?" And then she was like, "The assistants at the Fed, they don't get promoted fast." I'm like, "I'm not going to be an assistant." So I was getting a job that was like 3 times the salary, almost 3 times the salary, and it was a higher grade of job. So I was working in the public information office as a representative. So that had some bearing on my economics degree because really there were a number of parts of the job. One of the parts was I would give lectures to high school students and to business uh, employees about the workings of the Federal Reserve Bank, and then we found information for people. People called and asked questions, so I had to help them do that. And then work on the different monetary documents that came out. So every Thursday, there's some documents, money, stock, and liquid measures, and some other things that are telling people how the Fed thinks the economy is doing, and people make decisions based on that. So this was quite some time ago, before things were released online and before all this electronic things. I did have email and those things, but people physically came to pick up these documents every week. They stood in line. Clearly, everybody didn't get them at the same time. And there was such responsibility in making sure that you didn't give out this information too quickly, too soon. And I remember that with this one guy, always had an issue because somehow, I don't know, it wasn't for me because I didn't do it. He would release the data like a couple of minutes early. So it was going out like 4 o'clock when the markets closed, and he was releasing data a few minutes too early. So he would get
Oh.
himself in the banned list. So that was more directly related to the economics education that I had. But I also had also been very creative most of my life. So even in high school, like I said, I did everything. I also did some video projects, and I was in a video program, had interest in doing other things. So when I left the Fed, I went to MTV. Well, I worked on my first master's in media studies at the New School for Social Research, and which is now the New School University. And I switched from talking about the Fed to talking about music.
I mean, you mentioned that, you had like this creative side while you were in high school and had worked on other things in addition to your interest in math and whatnot.
Mhm.
What was there something specific that motivated you to go back to school to study at the new school, or I guess how did that come about, or what was
Yeah.
the
So
decision
one,
process?
I knew that I could work at the Fed, but I didn't really want to work in the Fed anymore. And I wanted to do, I had always said that I wanted to do more media. So I had figured out going to the new school that I can get the degree in media studies and have the Fed pay for most of it, and position it because I was in the public information office and we shared information and we shared media and we shared those things with the public, that I could position my degree as advancing my career there. But the longer term goal for me was to leave and to get into uh, cable television production. So I had that dream. I had done some of it before. So I wanted to. I'd produced things before. I had even produced shows for like public access and other things. So I liked doing that. Um, so I am both very left and right brain. Like I like math, so I am creative and I like math, right? So I like both of those things, but I felt like the Fed is a more traditional kind of role, and I thought, yeah, I've had enough of this. Let's try something else, and let's do it before I'm afraid to move on. I think I had a couple of conversations with people who talked about how they were staying in jobs they didn't like, and I didn't want that to be me. So my job was okay. I liked the people I worked with. It was interesting. Um, but I didn't want to feel that I was trapped there. And I also felt like going to other places there was just, trying to figure out the best thing as opposed to what I really wanted to do. Got accepted to the new school and worked on getting my degree. And then the really good thing for me was after you get accepted, I didn't have to get each class approved. They would approve anything in the program. So I took, a good amount of production classes and worked on different projects of my own and worked on projects with other classmates. So it was a great experience for that. And then from there, I went to MTV. I was first an intern before I was hired for a little while.
Taking into consideration that like very first position that you had through the agency and then your experience at the Fed, um, how how prepared did you feel for entering the working world? Like once you left college, did you feel prepared for those early positions, or do you feel that you could have benefited from either knowing more in a certain area or something like that?
So no, so I think I felt prepared for the position. I think the issue with positions in those roles wasn't my general knowledge. I think sort of knowledge on how the work world works and how to best leverage working with people and what people actually appreciate, right? So I think because these situations they are less diverse, which wasn't a problem after being at Vassar for all that time. But the when I was at the um, Times Mirror magazine, the person above me was fired.
Oh,
She'd been in the workforce force for a year. So I remember telling them, I will stay if you promote me. And they were like, no, you and even the person who was fired, the person who couldn't do her job, and really no offense to anybody who was in these early circulation jobs, this was not intellectually challenging. It was not, no, mm-mm. We're looking at some numbers on it. The thing is, are you exposed to it? Can you do what someone else tells you to do? Yeah, I could do that. So when they said they didn't want to promote me, I was like, okay, I got a job that's making more money and more responsibility. I will take that. So I think the thing that is more challenging is to think about how best to deal with people. When the woman called me from the agency and said, "Why didn't I call her?" and she assumed that I had an assistant's job, was well, no one here is really valuing me, and I think I've had some good moments to recognize that you know, I what I have to offer is valuable. And yeah, I was prepared for the job, but I think more on the emotional quotient, kind of navigating with people and making alliances and networking with people. I don't think I really focused on that part until much later, and probably even went to business school. So to recognize that it's just not what you do, it's in how people value you and what you do. Because you could be doing the same exact job as the person sitting next to you, and they could decide they like that person better, and they will spend more time, energy, and talent with that person. So you have to make sure that you're that person.
you started getting into it, your career once you left the Fed, your early
Mhm.
positions there at MTV. Can you take us through the journey of how you got to where you currently are?
Yeah, so when I left the Fed, I went to MTV as an intern because I was working on my master's degree. I could become an intern, and I've really felt that I needed production experience at at a major company. So I ended up in the creative services department, so which is the department that makes the trailers and promos for the network. So that was a lot of fun and a lot of experience and a very different environment. So one, I didn't have to wear a suit every day or be business professional. I could wear jeans or whatever, but I probably dressed up more than the other people. Not that I wore a suit, but I remember people say, "Where are you going?" And I would have on pants and a shirt. I was like, "I'm coming here." That's it. So it's definitely a different atmosphere, and I had an opportunity to, as a PA, as a production assistant, to produce some things. So the term production assistant means something different depending on where you are. Some production assistants are like the right hand of the senior person in a smaller company, and they could do absolutely everything. So I had a good experience there. Worked with lots of people. and then produce some choose or lose voting spots. I remember the first things I produced, and wrote some scripts that I saw that were executed similarly after I left. So that was exciting to know that my creative ideas worked and that I could pitch some people. And then from there, it was a little challenging to find the next thing. I didn't really want to be a freelancer. I hadn't really committed to that. And if I had gone back, I probably would have committed to it more and figured out how to navigate more. So then I was at WCBS, in their on-air promos department, and then I ended up at HBO in their post-production delivery planning and operations group. So again, I was hired as a production assistant, but I had more responsibility. I was responsible for the finance of the department, which is really the accounting. Um, and I was hired to basically straighten out this whole accounting and these processes. So really what our group did was when the sales team from HBO sold product to someone else, we made sure it was able to be delivered. So we might have to remaster something, and that would not be me. We might have to make trailers and promos. So because I had the experience at MTV and WCBS, I took on the responsibility after I got there. I navigated my way to get that to produce the trailers and promos. So that was one thing that I think I did well. I went into my boss and said, I'm looking for more responsibility. I had already pretty much straightened up the finances. I created this relational database and got everybody paid off because there were a lot of people that were not paid. And vendors of HBO should be paid because HBO had the money, and then took on those responsibilities. So that was also a good experience. And again, when I left there, I had gotten a grade promotion, but not a title promotion. So I remember the HR person saying to stay, that I would get it eventually. So I remember my three bosses up called me and said, "Congratulations, you are being promoted to production assistant." And I said, "I'm already production assistant." So I called the HR person, the sister in HR who I was friends with, and she said he refuses to give you the title. So, which I should have been associate producer. So I just left and went to business school. Um,
So actually, just to cut in there,
mhm.
um, I guess did you ever receive like an explanation as to why? Because it's one thing, I guess, if you let's say you asked for a promotion and you didn't get the title and you didn't get the raise, but to get the raise but not the title, what was like the logic behind that?
So the logic is racism, but the no one's going to tell you that. So I just got inside information that I should have gotten the increase. So what they did was, um, sometimes companies have to look at the grade levels and the salary adjustments for their for departments. So they gave everybody an adjustment. So they couldn't
Okay.
not give me an adjustment, but he didn't want to give me, so within a certain range you can make more money and still be in a title. So instead of giving me the next title, he didn't. He decided he wasn't doing that. I don't know that anybody else got a title move. I'm trying to think. And maybe one or two people got a title move because it was, you know, he had a good number of things underneath him. But it was just, it showed me like, okay, you don't value me enough to think that I should get this. I'm not fighting with you for it. I'm trying to figure out strategically how I can get myself to where I want to be. So thank you, but I'm not going to pretend like you're giving me more than you are. So I'm not going to say thank you for me being a production assistant. I am already a production assistant. So, and interesting things happened too there because my first year there, I was there for about 3 years. I didn't have a performance review. So the second year, I had a different manager. So my manager had me report to someone who reported to him instead. So when I talked to him, he's like, "In your last year's performance review," I said, "I did not have a performance review last year." "Yes, you did." "No, I did not. I did not have a performance review." So whatever he was telling me was like, whatever, like you're making this up. So I went and I talked to another one of my friends, is the boss's secretary, and she said, yeah, they were scrambling to give you a performance review, so they made it up. So I never signed it. That I didn't have a performance review. So you're telling me things based on stuff that I have no idea, I've never seen before, because they somehow had a system where it was missed. So he's trying to give me things like I need to continue to do whatever. And his perspective, I took in what he said and recognized I couldn't do what he wanted to do because he wasn't really ultimately trying to I felt helped my career because he said I did too many trainings.
How's that a bad thing?
I need to spend more time in the office. Nah, I get all my work done and I go to trainings. So no, I'm gonna go. So I one of the things I worked on was the French version. So I helped um get the French versions. Anything that airs on HBO, there's original production. They create any movie, they create a French version in 90 days. So I created those. But when I got there, they said I could take French classes. But the guy who said that he was congratulating me and being promoted to PA also said that he wouldn't pay for me to take French. I didn't need to. And the thing about it was, it wasn't his department's money. So what's that about? We could speculate, but I don't need to. I just need to say how am I going to navigate in this situation? What am I going to navigate to? How am I going to best advance my career? Because clearly, we have a repetition of things where they're not trying to help me as best as I think I need to be helped. And if you're trying not to have me do those things, you need to give me a better rationale than anybody gave me. So, spending more time in the office, I'm like, everything I do is delivered on time. What are you talking about? I created the systems. I created the system that the bills are paid on time. I don't know who took care of it before I got here, but vendors were not doing work for HBO because they weren't getting paid. And it's not because HBO doesn't have the money. The stuff wasn't processed. So I created systems using my, analytical side and the number side. And then I did things on a creative basis. So when I left HBO and when I checked back in a year later, the job I had, they split it in two and hired two separate people. Sometimes you can't find exactly what great rationale is, but you have to know that it's not for you. So there's opportunity, but when it's not for you, you have to figure out what else to do.
You had started telling the story. You eventually, I believe, then went back to grad school.
So what I did was I was on the HBO intranet looking at all the executives. So and reading all their bios to figure out how they got to where they got. Now, really, what I should have done is spend a lot of time talking to all these people, but that I didn't do that. So I just read all their bios, and I found that there are some people who had been there since they graduated college, and they managed to work their way up with one degree. Some people had law degrees and then went to other law firms where they were in the entertainment practice and transitioned over, and then other people had MBAs. So I figured the best thing for me to do is to get an MBA. So I studied for the GMAT and did have the company pay for my GMAT training, and then I applied and got in.
Taking that into consideration, that you'd now been working for a few years. It had been some time since you'd attended undergrad,
Hmm.
and you'd gotten your master's a bit early in your career from the new school. Did you see a difference? I mean, obviously, you were older, you had more like career experience and things like that. So I'm sure there was some change in you, but the experience of going to grad school versus undergrad, was there like a substantial difference between the, I guess, like the classroom experience and then also the students that you were in class with?
So not I, there are some differences, but so when I went to Vassar is a traditionally all women's college. It went co-ed in '68. I think that's right. But I was an econ major, so there were more men in my class, and as you know, there weren't that many. As I said before, there weren't many blacks on campus. So going to Columbia is actually very similar. So the female population is about 35% at Columbia, and then the black population is less than 5%, I'd say. So there were 43 black students in my class. This class is 650, I think, or 700 by the time we get the J termers. So being in that particular environment, that wasn't shocking to me. And I had gotten my master's, but I'm always in class. So if the at this point, if HBO was paying or someone else was paying, I was taking some class somewhere. So, I've been in a classroom environment. I like going to class. So I'd done a lot of it. I've taken classes at the American Institute of Banking. I was the permanent sub at my high school for a while. So I took classes at New York Institute of Technology. I've taken classes. Just I've taken classes, other media classes at NYU School of Continuing Education. So I have enough classes if we gather them up probably for another degree, maybe a degree and a half. So the difference in this is um, I think not really tremendous, but we had sort of the case method of classroom work, um, and we were put on teams to do some other cases, and we were in clusters. So that first year of classes, all of our classes we were in with the same people, which is kind of like first grade, right? You're in the same class, you're in classes with the same people. You go to the same thing. You go to reading together, you go to math together, you go to art together. So it's not that tremendously different. It is harder in the volume of work that you have, so it's some of the work is challenging, and depending on what it is, some of it's less challenging than others. And then, like, there are a lot of people taking finance who had finance backgrounds. I don't think they were as challenged by that class. So I think it just depends. But the atmosphere itself wasn't that new to me. I was sitting in a classroom. Um, Actually, my cluster had 10 Black people in it. So there are 8 clusters. So we had the largest out of any cluster. So that was probably a little bit different because there were more Black people than any class I had been in outside of Spelman. So, but yeah, it was a lot of work. Um, you had to work on teams and figure out how to get stuff done. But it was a lot of work, and you had to also figure out what not to do. Because sometimes it's just like this is just too much to read. This is just too much to do. What can I do to make sure I'm prepared for the next class?
Okay. And then once you graduated from business school, and what was like the path from there to get you to where you are now, being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I think some of it is just procrastination on how to get to that spot, right? And then looking at security of like, okay, this job is going to be secure. But I graduated in 2001, and you may remember or may not know. So that was the year of the stock market, the bubble, the internet bubble crash. So the stock market did poorly. A lot of things did poorly. So a lot of my classmates lost their jobs that they were given offers. So when I graduated, I didn't have an offer, but I wasn't particularly concerned about it because the media hiring is really transactional. So people hire when they need a person. They don't do as much on-campus recruiting as management consultants and banking do, and some other fields do. So I wasn't really concerned about that. But in the fall after 9/11, it was pretty challenging. So I ended up working a lot of temp jobs, looking. And it was hard because a lot of places had hiring freezes. So then my first um, job, my first permanent job was working for Cablevision. And I worked for MagRack, which was the first direct to video on demand. So it started at the beginning of the video on demand. So it's interesting working in a product launch and the beginning of the technology, because you have to explain the technology to people as well as explain your product. So it was, as Josh Sapan, who was the CEO at the time, a little ahead of its time. So I sort of knew that and had another opportunity. So I left there to go to JP Morgan Chase and to be in their leadership development program. Because I had a junior role in my first job, but I really wanted to be into that production role. So I went to JP Morgan Chase, and again, it's an opportunity for me to more than double my salary and to have to go into a leadership development program. So I went through a strategy group, um, business process operations group, and a marketing group. Um, and then JP Morgan Chase merged with Bank One, and Jamie Dimon became the CEO. So that to me was a great opportunity for me to leave there because I really didn't want to be in that space. I wanted to be in the media space. So I left there and went to ESPN. So I stayed at ESPN for about 6.5 years, clearly the longest time I've been in any place. I started in production where I worked in basically doing some branded entertainment, so production development in that area. So integrating the advertisers into the programming. Then I went to ESPN Deportes and International, doing some of that same work on both the studio production side and the remote production side. And then I was in the production operations group was the last role. So that experience was good to be exposed to that. Again, it was really an all numbers role. I like numbers fine. I didn't particularly find that this role was helping me get a lot of exposure, or I didn't feel I was adding a lot of value. It also exposed me to some of the parts of doing some HR for the group. I mean, it was good, but it wasn't really, I think, leading me to where I wanted to go. So I decided that, I needed to leave. And coming back to New York was the chance to actually, even if I was going to interview, it's better to be in New York than to be in Bristol, which is where I was. So I interviewed for some jobs at the same time. I applied to, I created an RFP with some people. So a proposal for Comcast, who was launching some networks. So they didn't choose mine. Um, they chose P Diddy and Magic the first time for their networks. So I had done worked on that, and then I had also at the same time been doing Gospel Fit, which is I had been doing it as a blog, and been doing a little work on events at my church on trying to help health and wellness in the Black faith space, and then working on those things along with RBN Media, just doing some other random media projects. So that was the transition to that, to try to figure out how we can help health in the Black community because we are suffering from a number of health disparities. So how can we make that better? And then also figure out how we can do that in media as well as what other projects will make that make more sense. So I'm still working on in that space now. Um, so Gospel Fit still exists. I am focused now on doing Soul Joy Wellness. And I was just thinking today, I haven't decided if I am making that an LLC or having it just be a subsidiary of Gospel Fit or RBN Media. But we're working on building another brand to sort of give it a broader face. Because I think oftentimes when I tell people that I do Gospel Fit, especially people who aren't Black, that they think of it as music only, and that's not what it is. So we do some events and programming, and then we're working on some video as well.
If you could go a little bit deeper into, I'm pretty curious about Gospel Fit, and
Mhm.
I don't remember the other, the new program that you're working on.
You have a Soul Joy Wellness?
Yes.
Sure.
So, what are you thinking about doing with that, or what's the
Yeah.
plan for it?
Yeah. So I was actually diagnosed when I was working at the Federal Reserve Bank. So I was 23 years old. I was diagnosed with atrial fibrillation. Can't even say that now. But it's an irregular heartbeat, not caused by a valvular issue. So typically people are diagnosed with this in women in their 60s and men, are in their 70s. But I was 23. And I was pretty athletic. So I would run in 5Ks. I was in pretty good shape, probably in better shape than I am in now. But yet I had an irregular heartbeat. And I never really claimed that I had heart disease. It's kind of, the good Christian thing. I'm like, don't claim it. But I would probably was irresponsible because I didn't take my medicine at that time on a regular basis. But one of the things I did do, I went to a lot of health fairs. They were really boring to me. You have a lot of doctors talking, and one, in my opinion, in my experience, one telling you the same thing that another one said. I was just bored out of my, this is from a person who likes to go to class. So, and the population at these health fairs was older or sick. So I fit into the sick category. And then I learned that all the health disparities that we have. So this is quite some time that we've had these health disparities. So anything that you can measure, we usually have it worse. So my goal was to try to figure out how can we do better, how can we be more healthy? And not just from the perspective of being healthy, but there are things that we need to do here in this world, and there are things that we as people of color need to do to level the playing field, let's say, or to be more equitable. And if we're sick, we can't do any of that. So whatever it is, your personal purposes, you can't do it if you have to really take care of yourself in such a way that you're maintaining your health and um, you know you're really sick and incapacitated. So one of the things that seemed to be engaging people or people were excited about was The Biggest Loser. So the first thing I did was I created a challenge. So I did this challenge with um, my sister and some of her friends, and they were pretty engaged in that. And then I tried to do other things around health and wellness and to encourage people to be healthy. Because just telling people they need to be healthy is not enough, because we all know that. We all know that we need to eat well and exercise more. It's just not happening. And in fact, over this time period, in every economic group, um, we're suffering. So I've done a lot of those things, and including doing 5Ks. So 5Ks are 3.1 miles, and people often feel like they couldn't do 3.1 miles. They don't recognize how long that is. So we expose a lot of people to that. And then besides the event itself, because a racer's event, a person who races, they come, they'll race, they'll go home. So we add other things to it. We add um, healthcare screenings to it. So our race is actually called Run Walk Praise. So we add to that music, gospel music and other G-rated music, and then we'll have spoken word and we'll have dance. So to make it more of an interesting and engaging event. So so we've been doing that. So I found, even though I started this in 2006, um, and really growing it really locally, I never really trademarked it. And then when I was working on a trademark, someone has a similar trademark that she trademarked in 2015, which she wasn't using and she didn't want to give up. So I needed to change it at a time where I thought I needed to change some of the stuff we're doing. So that's why I came up with Soul Joy Wellness. So we'll do some of the same events the Run Walk Praise will continue to do. We'll grow a different presence on social media. It'll be more of a brand that includes me a little bit more, just because from my observation, I think people are connecting more with people. And then in person, I'm the face of it, but on social media, I really wasn't before. And do some more video education as well. So we're working on developing some of that um, projects and work in to different places locally and then online as well to help people be more educated about health, and then to be more entertained by it too. So it might sound weird, but to the purest scientist, doctor, whatever, they just want you to get that health information. But from the practical perspective of me as a storyteller and as an entertainer and an educator, it has to be entertaining and engaging. And that's the goal of doing all of those things.
If you can talk a little bit about RBN media, I actually like urban media more, but
Yeah. So that is the when I started doing the RFP for Comcast, and we were doing
mhm.
some production around that. So the goal is, to tell stories about and for people of color. So, um, we say RBN or urban media is how I came up with those letters, trying to figure out what we were going to do for that. But basically, in this instance, it could be anything that's really not uh, in the Gospel Fit Soul Joy Wellness perspective. But I've done some other videos for other projects, and trying to tell our story, which is why I say that I got into this business, was to tell the stories of women and people of color in particular. So it's an outlet for doing that.
You spoke about sort of branching out and not necessarily moving away from the gospel and church focus, but more so refreshing what you're doing with the
Mhm.
Gospel Fit company. Um, what kind of things do you have planned for, let's say, the rest of 2019 and the near future for your companies? What would you hope to do or to accomplish?
Yeah, so we have a race scheduled for June the 15th on Long Island at Baldwin Park. So that's a run walk praise. And then we have another one scheduled on July the 13th in the city and Rounders Island Park. So those are the bigger events that we're planned. We're looking at doing some other things, some vision board parties and some other advocacy things as well. Because one of the things that is critical is that people recognize that we're some of the things that we're suffering from, some of the health disparities that we're suffering from, impact us irrespective of our socioeconomic background. So sometimes people think these problems are happening just to those of us who have less income, and that's not true. So when we look at Black women in the US, they all suffer from maternal and infant mortality at significantly higher rates than anybody else. So um, we really want to make sure that people recognize that so that they can make sure they're getting proper care. Because it's one thing just to be aware, but now that you're aware, what do you do about that? So we'll be doing some advocacy around that as well, just help educate people on those facts that we're all suffering from this. And some of it is what you're doing, how you're taking care of yourself. Some of it is your access to healthcare, and some of it is do you have quality healthcare? And then the fourth is, are you informed? When you're not feeling well and someone tells you you're all right, are you, fighting for your life? So, when Serena Williams, who is not lacking the money for any healthcare, had to insist that her doctors perform the test that saved her life. When she tells them, I can't breathe, I'm having trouble breathing, they're like, you're okay. And she's like, no, do this test because I know my body. So we have to become much more educated on that, and we have to be advocates in our own families, in our own lives, but in our communities, because it's not just if you have low income. And then whether you have low income or high income, you need to know some of these things. And we just don't have that information. It's a little more conversation on it now than there used to be, but we need to work on that. So those are some of the things. And then we're going to be working on trying to pull together some people who do work in faith and fitness. There are a lot of us out there, but there's no real collective or collection of people. So I've been talking to a lot of people, and I've interviewed some and just talked to some people about how to expand the work that we're doing and how to provide better resources to us so that we can be impactful and have enough resources and enough revenue to keep doing this work.
What are your future plans for RBN Media?
So that's a little up in the air. I mean, I always, I'm not at a lack of an idea. Um, I have, I have a number of ideas to work on. It's just right now I need to focus and get the Soldier Wellness a little bit more m- move forward, I think, before I spread myself too thin. So the question is, when do I start doing that? And that probably won't start until like the second half of the year to figure out what I'm going to do on that next. Of course, if something just springs up and it's a perfect opportunity, I'll pursue it. But it is, you know, as you can tell, I like to do so many different things, but that can be distracting and mean that the other important things don't get done. So for the moment, it's a little less happening with that. Um, but there'll probably be some things in the starting in June, or I should say July, like after this race, the second race happens.
Taking like a more, I guess, high level view of
Hmm.
looking over your career and your experiences, how do you personally define success?
I think success is pursuing what it is you really want to do, despite any feeling of fear that you have, trying to figure out a way to make what you want to happen happen. It doesn't mean that you have the same exact view the entire time, but being willing to change with that and then to pursue it passionately and say, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is what I want to make happen. So, you gain more skills along the way, and to be open and to be a continual learner, but to focus on the goal, even though that could be a moving target.
And then taking that into consideration, as well as your career experiences,
Hmm.
um, looking back over your career, would you say that either your past experiences or based on where you are now, sort of working on more of the things that speak to you and that you're interested in, would you consider your career as having matched, surpassed, or fallen short of your aspirations and expectations?
Um, so I definitely think that I would have managed myself to be further along now. I think in any one section of it, I think there are always some successes and there's some challenges. So I think when we're envisioning our career, we don't actually envision the challenges along the way, and the challenges range from so many different things, right? So some of it is the people who aren't trying for you to be successful. Um, so I think I'm almost on track. Oops. I think I'm almost on track. I think with doing these things uh, with Soul Joy Wellness and some other projects, uh, overall it will be even better. But there are other things like, I own my townhome. I've done a good number of things in my sorority that I really appreciate that I hadn't envisioned those either. I've been chair and of things. I led the African American Alumni Association at Columbia Business School. I was on the board, the Alumni Association for Vassar College, and the African American Alumni Association at Vassar College. So overall, I think it's a good breadth of things. But in the strict things, the 18-year-old me thinking like, all the things that I would have, I think it just worked out differently. But I do think I'm successful, and I am going to be even more successful this year. So there are some things that are a little less than I had planned, um, but I'm still gonna get there.
You mentioned, like, your 18-year-old self, the
Mhm.
expectations that you had then, like, the reality has been different, you know,
Yeah.
for where you are now. If you could speak to your younger self or any young person, either in college or just getting ready to enter the workforce, what, either career or overall life advice would you offer to that
Mhm.
person?
I think you have to work at being more fearless, and to recognize that you are gonna have some fear, but you have to work at overcoming that. And then you also have to work at, giving yourself the experiences that will help you. So, and not to be afraid to take on something new. So all the jobs that I had at ESPN didn't exist before I took them. So I also say that you have to be able to um, envision something and to be flexible and go with something that didn't quite exist. Because oftentimes, because I do some career coaching as well, I think people find it difficult to talk about what they really want to do and the kinds of things that what does that mean if it doesn't exist in a career already. And as things are rapidly changing, so many things out there don't exist yet that will exist in the next 5 years. And people might be really well positioned for them, but they're also really reticent to take on something that they're not sure about how it's going to work out. So I think you have to balance all of that, um, and build a better network to help you and to help you see how you can navigate the best way through.
Okay. And then imagine it's years from now and you're nearing or already retired. When you look back over your career, what accomplishments or achievements would make you consider it a roaring success versus mediocre or disappointing? What would you be most proud of?
Well, I think one of the things I'm most proud of is of helping people along the way. So no matter what I've done, I've helped people to advance themselves. And I definitely do coaching on a professional level. So I've had people paid for that. But I've also mentored people and given people, you know, free or unsolicited advice. So in general, I try not to give too much unsolicited advice, but I do feel that I've helped other people along the way and taken on challenges um, outside of my day-to-day work, so, and become a better advocate for myself and the community. So some of those things don't show up all the time as, on tops of resumes, but I also feel that I managed to do some things that, you know, I might have been a little scared to do, but did them anyway, and then try to figure out how to get to the next thing and develop some great friends and great resources to help me navigate.
Have there been any people, whether famous or only known to you, or events that have motivated, inspired, or influenced you in your career?
There are, I think, a lot of people. So my parents are the first. So my mother taught us how to read before we went to school, and she's not a teacher by training, right? So she did at one point become a work in the education system, but I think that was even after she taught us how to read. So I think they were really good at exposing us to a lot of things. So that's why I know how to fence or learn how to ski and do all those things. So I think they were really good at exposing us. So I think that was really influential. And for also for my sisters and I have three sisters, for to know that, people might have more or they might have less, they might have more education or less education, but no one's better than us and we're better than no one else, which sort of puts you in a position where, okay, we can take on this challenge because we are well equipped for that. And then, we have a faith that they helped us to develop as well. So I think that is really important. Some other people, I think my line sisters, I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Theta Iota Omega chapter, which is where I was initiated. Vassar had nothing to no Greek organizations at all. And my Lion sisters helped me at different times in my career. One is a physician, and I worked for her for a while, and another works in HR, and during a phase of doing temporary work, she helped to get me a job. And in general, I think they were a great supportive group of people who always encouraged me to do more. And then professionally, I think Oprah, as a media person, has an inspirational story. She's been inspirational the entire time. It's sort of, I want to be similar to Oprah. I don't want to be her. I want to be similar and to be able to impact people with story and with the platform that I'm working on.
Have there been any books that you've read that have influenced or inspired you? Either, your ideology, how you approach work, or just you as a person?
Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, he wrote another book. Oh, The Success Principles. So he's not the only one, but he wrote the book on success principles, which is one of the things is take 100% accountability for your life. So, which often to people might seem a little odd because at the same time I believe that I believe in faith as well, and that God has shown me grace and favor over and over again. But I think when you approach your life with that and taking responsibility for the situation that you're in, so if my current situation isn't what it should be, it would make me what I want it to be. I wouldn't be passive about making it better. So I think that's one of the books that has really helped on that perspective. God's creative power. So there's God's creative power for your finances, God's creative power for your health, God's creative power for your life. So, and that it really talks about sort of connecting yourself with the word and being positive about it. And sort of what you're thinking about is sort of like the secret, but in a more practical faith based way. So, there you can get those books separately or as a compilation. So, I have the God's creative power, and then I go back to that. So, if I'm feeling challenged, like I just can't feel like something's not right, but I remember that, that I'm doing this, I'm responsible, and then I'm responsible for making sure that I've aligned myself with what God wants me to do, and to know that God is for me and always for me, not against me, and that with his power I can do all things. So it's not just me, even though I'm responsible for my life and perspective. Key takeaways. It's not what you do, but rather how much people value what you do. Doing a good job often isn't enough to receive recognition and opportunities. Getting ahead requires networking and pitching. Network to connect and build relationships with people that can help you along your journey. Pitch to ensure your connections understand what you do, and more importantly, the value of your knowledge and experience. Assess where you are and where you want to go. Is your current position aligned with your career and personal aspirations? Is your company supportive of your goals? If any of those factors are out of alignment, begin creating a plan for getting closer to where you want to be. Learn. Constantly and consistently. Push yourself to expand your knowledge and hone your skills. This can be through the formal education process of taking classes or simply taking on new roles and responsibilities at work. The point is to continue learning and growing in your career. Thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up button. I also hope you subscribe to the channel and return to get motivated, get inspired, get stories of Black history made and in the making.
Until next time, take care. Thanks again for tuning in, and I hope you return to watch future episodes. For more information about Noir Histoire, visit the Noir Histoire website. There you'll find text, video, and audio for each episode all in one place. Subscribe to the Noir Histoire newsletter to get fresh content delivered straight to your email inbox. You can also subscribe to the Noir Histoire YouTube channel for videos. If you're enjoying the content but would prefer to listen to audio, you can subscribe to the Noir Histoire podcast. Follow Noir Histoire on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. Enjoy the rest of your day.